"Ma'am, drop the rifle," the officer screamed out again. All because I was hunting ducks on my own goddamn land. What she didn't know, I wasn't just licensed. The officer's hands were up like I was some fugitive from a bad action flick. You know the kind, where the misunderstood anti-hero gets surrounded because some overzealous busybody thinks a duck call is a threat to national security. To his credit, the younger of the two officers looked immediately embarrassed. The older one, though, he recognized me. I could tell by the double take. "Yes, sir," I said, watching the HOA president peek out from behind a pine like a raccoon that just knocked over a trash can. "Did Karen call this in again?" I asked, already knowing the answer. This wasn't the first time she called and shots fired when she heard a 12-gauge echo through the trees. The officer radioed in that the threat was a licensed federal wildlife officer conducting a routine duck hunt on private property, and dispatch's reply was a weary, "Oh, God. Is it Karen again?" As the cruiser drove off, Karen emerged like she was auditioning for a courtroom drama she wrote herself. She was dressed in her usual uniform, neon windbreaker, oversized sunglasses, and an air of authority no one had given her. "What children?" I asked, scanning the empty cul-de-sac. "It's 6:30 in the morning and 34 degrees. The ducks are out, the kids are inside eating Cocoa Puffs." 2 days later, I found a letter stuffed in my mailbox. Stuffed. It was from the HOA, bearing a $2,500 fine for unauthorized firearms activity endangering residents. Attached was a map with a red line drawn in Sharpie encircling my land, and labeling it as Future HOA Expansion Zone. I could practically see Karen hunched over her kitchen table, with a ruler and a vengeance playlist. Voluntarily agreed to be part of the covenant. My land was never part of the agreement. In fact, my deed explicitly states exemption from any future homeowner associations. I sent a copy of my deed, maps, and federal exemption paperwork to the HOA PO box, complete with a polite note, "Please remove me from your records. Your authority does not extend to my land. Sincerely, Jake Carter." At this point, it was getting amusing. I figured she'd try to escalate, but I didn't expect what came next. I blinked at it like it was a mirage. I turned around slowly, half expecting her to be hiding in the bushes again with binoculars and a measuring tape. I took photos of the sign, the boundary markers she'd clearly moved, and the metal cable she'd laid across the public access ramp to make it look like a restricted area. I sent the photos to Officer Ruiz, who had been dealing with Karen for years. She called me 10 minutes later and said, "You want the short version or the fun version?" She replied, "You've got enough here for a formal investigation." And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think it's time we finally take the gloves off. Field trainer. The agent she called on me? But I hadn't seen the worst yet, because the next time she called the cops, it wasn't over hunting. It was over a suspicious wildlife lab she claimed I was building in my shed. I wish I were kidding. There, just a few feet onto, Doug looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Karen, on the other hand, turned to me with the smug expression of someone who thinks a little clip art duck on a sign grants her jurisdiction over federal law. Karen puffed up. I blinked slowly, digesting that word salad. "On land you don't own? That's been legally zoned as hunting friendly for over half a century? Without notifying the actual property owner?" I wanted to laugh, but instead, I pulled out my phone and began recording. She tried to shield her face with her clipboard like I was paparazzi. Doug froze mid-hammer and took a slow step back. Karen scoffed. "This is a gray area. We're protecting the—" I glanced around. Still no children, just squirrels. "Karen," I said, "the only child in danger here is the one who gets too close to that trap you set last week." Karen and Doug packed up and left not long after, but not before she threatened to take this to the regional council. Whatever that meant. Probably a fancy way of saying she'd post about it on the neighborhood Facebook group. She ran like a dictatorship. I followed its path with binoculars and watched it land in Karen's backyard like a trained pigeon. Now, spying on someone's property might not be a federal crime in itself, but when you do it with surveillance equipment and claim it's for compliance reasons, you've just stepped over a legal line. I told her I'd start gathering more documentation, and I did. I installed trail cams, I collected timestamps. I even got audio of Karen boasting at an HOA meeting about how she was going to box in the duck hunter so she could finally get control of the lakefront breaking laws. He was the one who sent me the audio file, no name attached, but the metadata gave him away. That's when I realized Karen was trying to bait me into overreacting. She wanted me to get angry, to make a mistake, probably so she could file some sort of restraining order and paint herself as the victim. Karen's next move was bold and unbelievably stupid. She called 911 bomb making. I was in the backyard splitting firewood when they arrived. They rolled up with lights and sirens, jumped out in full gear, and told me to step away from the shed. Inside, duck decoys, a compound bow, a tackle box, and a thermos of coffee. One fireman chuckled. Hazardous caffeine levels, maybe. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I was just following up on community safety, she said, her voice cracking. He's a menace. He has. Ruiz pointed at my shed. Lady, the only thing lethal in there is a moldy energy bar and maybe his coffee. And then I saw it. A wire, thin and half buried under some leaves, leading toward the property line. It wasn't a trap this time. It was a homemade motion sensor, wired to a flashing camera and what looked like a blinking Wi-Fi transmitter. ZIP tied to a tree branch. Surveillance device on my land. She thought she was being clever. She thought by keeping it off the HOA books and calling it a private security effort, she could skirt any laws. What she didn't realize was that by placing unauthorized recording devices on federally exempt private land, she just broken not only state trespass laws, but potentially violated federal wildlife regulations. And that's something my agency takes. The next morning, I walked into the county recorder's office with a folder thick enough to use as a doorstop. Inside it were high-resolution photographs of tampered boundary markers, drone flight paths, false citations from the HOA, voice recordings of Karen making incriminating statements, and surveillance footage showing her setting up devices on my land. I smiled. That's the idea. I asked Marcy if she'd be willing to submit a formal statement. She grinned and said, I'll staple it to her next fake fine, if you want, very seriously. Meanwhile, the HOA continued its slow collapse under Karen's iron grip. People were getting fed up. Doug, the loyal but increasingly nervous sidekick, had started asking quiet questions during board meetings. Why were they spending money on drone tech? Why were they issuing fines that no one else had voted on? Why was Karen so obsessed with one guy who didn't even belong to the HOA? Doug finally cracked when Karen suggested installing a. I told him to send everything to a secure drive and to make backups. Karen had crossed into paranoid territory, and paranoid people do reckless things when they feel cornered. We walked the property. I showed them the tampered markers, the signs, the location of the now-removed surveillance device, and the trail cam footage that captured Karen giving orders to Doug, like she was directing a low-budget spy movie. Karen, of course. She'd seen us from her deck and marched over like she was rallying the troops. She didn't recognize Lisa or my boss at first. She assumed they were city officials, maybe surveyors. She launched into a tirade about dangerous land use and disturbing wildlife populations, and how she was on the board of environmental responsibility, which, to my knowledge, did not exist. She blinked, the color draining from her face. I didn't confess to anything. She tried to pivot, tried to smile, said she was just trying to preserve the beauty of the neighborhood. Karen's mouth hung open, struggling to form words. I didn't know she started, but Lisa cut her off again. We walked away, leaving Karen standing there like a lawn ornament that had outlived its seasonal use. My supervisor added, depending on what else we find, this could trigger an audit of the HOA's charter and financials. But the story wasn't done. Not even close. I showed up uninvited, but not unannounced. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a sterile little room with folding chairs and a popcorn machine that hadn't worked since 2004. I waited until she finished her rant, then stood up. Hi everyone, I'm Jake. I live next door, and I have a folder full of documents that show your president has been committing actual crimes. In the name of values, I've got recordings, emails, even a statement from a federal officer. Your HOA is under investigation, and Karen here has just made every single one of you legally vulnerable. If you keep letting her speak on your behalf. Karen spun on him like he betrayed a blood oath. You're weak, she hissed. You don't care about our safety. The room descended into murmurs and whispers. A couple of older residents got up and left. One woman asked if they could vote to suspend Karen. Another asked if the HOA had legal coverage for this kind of thing. The next day, Karen tried to retaliate one last time. She filed a restraining order against me, claiming I had threatened her with legal intimidation. The judge looked at the evidence I presented, including her email about using HOA fines to box me illegally, and dismissed it before I'd even finished my coffee. I said, sure, just make sure you get her name spelled right. The mood had shifted from gossip to revolt. People started knocking on my door, not to complain, but to apologize. A retired couple from 2 houses down brought me fresh pie and a typed letter, stating they never supported Karen's actions. A dad with twin toddlers asked me if I needed help taking down any of her signs. And 3 different board members sent me private messages asking how to legally dissolve the HOA before it dragged them all into court. A few days after the reporter published her story, I was woken up at dawn by flashing lights. Not the kind from cop cars this time. News vans. 3 of them, parked just outside the HOA sign, now spray painted with the words Karen Country in large block letters. Later that afternoon, I was called down to the county office for an official debrief. Lisa met me in a quiet conference room and laid out the results like a prosecutor, giving a closing argument. The HOA had been operating under a charter that expired 6 years ago. No one had renewed it, meaning, technically, legally, the HOA didn't exist. All the fines, citations, and community rules Karen had been waving around like commandments from a suburban Mount Sinai were completely unenforceable. Worse, she had signed her name on multiple documents as president, knowing full well there was no active board election in over a decade. That, coupled with the tampered boundary lines and fraudulent drone surveillance, amounted to more than just HOA drama. It was a perfect storm of civil, environmental, and financial violations. Lisa smiled faintly. She'll be fined substantially, possibly charged. The state will decide how far to push it. And the HOA? A new reality came home and made that a world of difference. I made my way back. And I see everyone standing on this side, and on that all I needed was that chance, those days. And to say I didn't mean what was happening would not be the damn right. It was the things to be damn seen. Meredith spoke. She did what it felt right, and she said it wasn't meant for me, it was you. You were the one who would say what none has seen. To know was damn and gone because, well, someone had to pay the damn price. I will not hear this. I said, what's it to be? This is all there, all new, and now you can say what will be with me and all I stand for. I just asked because damned if I could tell what these new forces had for me. It made the world scream, and now hell was coming. What does this mean? I muttered to say for something new to be said. When the light dies, what you have to say matters. This was where it all needed to get to. We were not to touch a lake again, I found out, but there I found her, the woman the hell had started. The tears were, well, all but real, and I had to call. They're here, I said, as for what the new call for justice. Just maybe that is what the new dawn was set for, because hell or hail, what is all? That could make it all matter anyway. Sometimes fighting for your home means more than just defending a building. Sometimes it means saving an entire community from the people who claim to protect it. And sometimes all you can do is watch the fire burn down, and the cold truth remains in the air.